My name is Theokile, has already been highlighted, from Paradigm Initiative. I'm a human rights lawyer and resident in Zimbabwe. So today, I think this conversation is something that is very critical, that we need to actually interrogate, because the role of the media or the role of the press cannot be overemphasized. It's a very critical role that is most pertinent and more so in relation to ensuring that citizens across the continent receive critical information, and more so now during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think my presentation basically is to just highlight that importance and to overstress why access to information and freedom of expression are very vital, and also to kind of flag out, you know, the international, we have that kind of support that. So I think from the onset, it's very clear that for any democratic society to thrive and to remain in that state of being democratic, it is most critical that they're able to actually uphold media freedoms. But you'd think that the issue of media freedoms is an issue that is, you know, that is clear for everyone, including the governments, which are responsible directly for the policies that regulate the role of the media. But it's not so much clear when we observe what's happening, because one of our critical roles as well as an organization is to monitor the environment and what's happening on the continent. It's actually quite saddening or very regrettable that you find that there's a lot of crackdown on journalists, a number of crackdowns even on bloggers, a number of crackdowns basically on civil society organizations, which is essentially crackdown on dissent, crackdown on difference in opinions, or crackdowns where there is anything to do with exposition of crime, organized crime, or exposition of human rights violations or corruption. So you find that that is something that we've been witnessing, I think, over the past decade in terms of what's going on, coupled with those crackdowns, which come in different shapes and sizes, from arrests, which are arbitrary, to abductions, and in the worst case scenario, to killings of media practitioners. You'd also see that there's also the issue of internet shutdowns that we've been experiencing, and around, you know, dissent. And these reprisals are something that is really a cause for concern. But what are these media freedoms and why are they necessary? If you look at Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it kind of, you know, set down the pace of what it is and made provision for freedom of opinion as well as expression, which right includes, you know, the freedom to seek, receive, and impart information. And this has cascaded as well into Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and of ICCPR, as well as you know, the ACHPR Article 9. So when you look at you know, both the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and you look at the African Charter, you know, on Human People's Rights, they also emphasize, you know, the importance, the relevance, the necessity that comes with, you know, press freedoms. So you find that most of now, when we're faced with a pandemic, critical information has to reach communities in terms of, you know, health. Not only that, you find that issues to do with education are very critical in this time. You'd find that, you know, a lot of people, or rather a lot of children in this environment, are not accessing, you know, education for obvious reasons, that we do not have, you know, the relevant framework in terms of digital infrastructure to ensure that access to, you know, to critical rights is availed to citizens across the continent. But what is most, you know, critical in all of this is the role of the media, and how, you know, they have been very, you know, instrumental in ensuring that people get information that is truthful, and as well information that is relevant in terms of the pandemic. And you'd find that apart from this, for any government, for any democratic government to actually, you know, be said to have good governance structures, it actually stems around, in my view, you know, media freedoms, and how, you know, the media is free to actually express themselves, free to unearth issues that are of critical concern to the citizenry. And that cannot be overemphasized. But there's always, that dimension that, or rather that what I call media paranoia that, that you find is, entrenched in some of our African governments, which is around this issue to do with, there's always this, this clause that comes in that, yeah, it's necessary in the face of national security. It's always about national security. But when you look at some of the cases, or most of the cases, you find that, there's nothing that is really, justifiable in terms of those crackdowns on media freedoms. While limitations definitely, for me, or the way I say it and view it, limitations to media freedoms must come in as a matter of an exception to the rule, which, of which press freedom, media freedoms, they should be, the starting point, and then the limitations follow as the exception, and not the reverse, which is sometimes what we see in practice. Why do I say so? Media freedoms basically, as I've already, laid out, that they are necessary. But then when we see what's happening on the ground, it's something totally different. But when we're looking at what to consider in terms of obviously limiting, press freedoms, they always, concerns over, the reputation of others, because rights cannot be enjoyed in exclusion of, the enjoyment of the rights of others, but also as a matter of national security. But obviously the guidelines, that must be followed. Whatever limitation that is in place obviously must be necessary, originating from a pressing and substantial need that is relevant and sufficient. And whatever limitation is there must have a direct and immediate connection to the expression and disclosure of information, etc. So apart from a law providing for that limitation of press freedom, it should really be necessary, and it should be justifiable that yes, there is this. And I think a number of times, our governments fall short of that standard, in my humble view. So I think based on that, also you look at right now in the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, there's now the new Declaration on Freedom of Expression and Access to Information. What must be done by states in terms of promoting media freedom? And one of the critical things that is mentioned in that declaration is obviously the issue of the independence of the, that they must be independent and be able to perform their duties, which are duties that are most critical and most pertinent. My recommendations basically state that that we are citizens of, that they must be able to address the issue of corruption or organized crime, broadly speaking, so that there is not that tension between, the states and, media practitioners. They should be able to also comply with the obligations in terms of the African Charter on Human People's Rights, and be able to also follow through. I think there's a good policy there when we're looking at, the Declaration of Freedom of Expression and Access to Information that was recently adopted by the 65th session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And also, I think to have, a good framework for ensuring the rule of law, because some of the cases that we're seeing on the continent are cases where you'd say, obviously, you'd expect even the judiciary to come in and also uphold international law, uphold regulations, that are sound. But you find that, sometimes the rule of law is just kind of slacky on that. So yeah, and just to say that, as media practitioners, it's also critical, I think, in terms of coalition building, in terms of building capacity, of building each other's capacity to be able to, speak with one voice, and to be able to also protect, to protect our space and raise awareness on critical issues. That will be all for me.